What is up, binge watchers? Welcome back to Screen Kings. For today's video, we'll be talking about the Filipino crime thriller On the Job, The Missing 8, directed by Erik Matti. Now, this one premiered earlier last month in the Venice Film Festival, where it bagged the Volpi Cup award for Best Actor Performance by Arcilla. And since this movie is 3.5 hours, the producers have decided to reformat it as a miniseries exclusively streaming on HBO Go Asia. It's a 6-part miniseries, while actually the first 2 episodes are part 1 of On the Job, the original film that debuted back in 2013. Now, do you need to watch these 2 episodes? I would say yes, just to get a refresher, and just because there are some characters here that crossed over from part 1 to part 2. But for the purposes of this review, I will be focusing on episodes 3 to 6, which is On the Job, The Missing 8, the whole thing that is played on Venice Film Festival. Now, this one tells the story of a journalist named Sisoy, played by Arcilla, who investigates the disappearance of his 8 colleagues, 7 of which are journalists, and the other one is an 8-year-old son of one of their said colleagues. And it also focuses on the story of Roman here, a prisoner who has been hired as a hitman. Now, if you've seen part 1, you know how this crime syndicate works in the Philippines. Sometimes politicians would hire prisoners who have lesser or petty crimes to do their assassination. So that's just how we do things here in the Philippines. And I like to believe that some of these things are happening all over the world. So part 1, it mostly focuses on the underbelly of the crime syndicates, involving the corrupt police officials, the politicians, and the prisoners turned hitmen. Now, what I like about this sequel, On the Job, The Missing 8, is it focuses more on the journalistic aspect. Now, how does this journalist play a key role in shedding light on the truth or possibly obscuring the truth? So it widens the scope. And also, while part 1 is mostly focused on Manila, because that's where the setting of this movie is, how gritty the place is, how it's a hostile and a violent place to live in, so you can expect a non-stop action, more of a neo-noir thriller. In here, it takes the slow burn thriller approach as a journalist procedural, and also they move the setting here to a province. And I think it's a brilliant decision because the show kind of makes a point that even though it's not Manila, it's not as gritty, it can also be as guilty when it comes to exercising its corruption in the local government and all these political shenanigans. Our town here is La Paz. It's a fictional town, and it has this track record as a low crime rate town. Though as the show progresses, we are going to learn that there are actually a lot of missing person cases in this town. Now, same with part 1, it also focuses on the prison life of this prisoners turned hitmen. Now, I would say part 1, they have more efficient and more professional hitmen, but in here, since the prisoners are more like followers, they don't really plan, there will be instances where the task assigned to them will not be performed as smooth and as efficient. So the show finds some dark humor in it. But the real focus of this show is on the journalistic aspect. As I've said, there are already a lot of key players here, and I think the show takes an investigative approach on finding how these key players, from the low-level ones to the higher-ranking officials, connect in this bigger conspiracy. So I think it's gripping to watch, definitely insightful. The year when this show is set is not mentioned in the show, but I would like to think that this is set somewhere in 2010s, where there is a struggle when it comes to fine print journalism or the traditional journalism when it comes to the newspapers, because the digital age is now booming, the social media. But one thing remains the same, and that is the propagation of fake news. There's this thing they call the envelope journalism, where basically politicians will try to bribe the journalist into releasing some fake news in order to control the narrative into their favor. So even if the story is set in 2010, it's still relevant because the phenomenon of fake news is still rampant as ever. Now, let's talk about one of my favorite aspects of the show, and this one being a character study, because I love the character development here for Sisoy. He is a corrupt journalist. early on, we're going to find out that he's actually a hypocrite because he's one of the co-founders of this newspaper organization along with his best friend Arnel, who will be one of the missing people here. Now, over the years, he starts to become somewhat of a crony for this mayor, that he's a defender for this mayor, that he's somewhat starts to act like a mouthpiece for this mayor, which not a journalist should be, right? So once he learns a lot of shocking things here, his loyalty will be challenged, whether it's into the public, delivering the truth in his newspaper organization, or to the mayor here, Pedring Eusebio, which is amazingly performed by Dante Rivero. So Cesar here will have to rethink his pro-government views and decide from himself what kind of journalist he's going to be. Because it's easy to just lay back and basically don't bite the hand that feeds you, as opposed to speaking up for the truth and thereby risking your life. The show makes a good impression in setting up his environment, so you will understand why Sisoy does these things, that it's not an easy choice to go against a system, especially a corrupt system that's already been ingrained way back. Also, I have to commend the other characters here. Lotlot de Leon is also compelling in her role as Weng, as this fearless and dedicated journalist. I think this is a good foil to the character of Sisoy because she's more of the ideological counterpart. And also, I would have to commend Christopher De Leon as Arnel, the co-founder slash best friend of Sisoy. Even though he's only here for a short amount of time, you can feel his presence throughout the movie because his character does some ghost apparitions in this movie, though it's not in a horror jump scare way, but it's more of a metaphorical symbol as the guilt of Sisoy here. And of course, John Arcilla is just fantastic in this role. He won the Best Actor award in the Venice Film Festival, beating the Hollywood names like Benedict Cumberbatch and Oscar Isaac. So this is actually a big thing and a big win for the Philippines. In this film, he showed so many dimensions for this character because initially he's this charming, somewhat unapologetic radio host, and over time, as he learns the truth, he becomes filled with fear and desperation. So you can feel the world weariness in his eyes, and the whole burden is felt in his performance. Likewise here, the character of Dennis Trillo, who plays Roman, he has this internal struggle because he is this hard hit man and he's just a pawn to these games. He can say no that easily to his boss without risking his life. Now let's talk about the direction style here by Erik Matti. I think this is one of his most ambitious projects because this is a multifaceted film. It's a prison film, it's a journalist film, a character study, also a world building here. So I appreciate his approach here. I think it really takes a skilled filmmaker to present the systemic rot in the country of the Philippines and make it something that's entertaining and thrilling. And likewise, in the first film, he employs these tracking shots where we follow one particular character in this setting to establish the mood and the atmosphere. I think that's a very effective way, and yeah, I can see some Scorsese influences here when it comes to his music choices. I believe that he has a hand in picking the music choices because there are some upbeat songs here, classic needle drops like songs by Frank Sinatra, and some Pinoy novelty songs, so they can provide some contrast and irony to the violence that's happening on screen. And also, as an added bonus, I was pleasantly surprised to hear a Tagalog version of Bella Ciao. So shout out to Marihais fans out there. However, some of the creative choices here did not work for me. For example, the use of split screens here. There's some episodes here where they use some split screens, and that will be used again on the next episode. So it kind of feels jarring, and also the application here of the social media post. I mean, I get the whole thing here where they're just going to barrage you with so many information and you have to decide for yourself what is going to be the real and the fake one. But for me, it looks more of a gimmicky approach. But one of the key strengths of this show is no doubt the script written by his wife, Michiko Yamamoto. And yeah, these are stories based on real life events, based on real life persons. So my worry going into this is how it's going to be received by international audiences, because it's too culture specific. It might be too layered and might be too difficult to follow. Honestly, I was just watching this with my sister and every now and then I get to forget some of the character names here, so we just keep asking each other. But I guess over the course of the show, you're going to pick up on their names and just get used to the amount of characters here, because even if it's too culture specific, I think the universal element of this show is it tackles about, relevant issues like the growing cases of impunity here, how these positions in power are never really penalized and just go away scot-free, and how they keep on using these fall guys, these scapegoats. There's a mistrust created between the public and these government institutions. So I think that's a universal thing that you can relate to even if you're not Filipino. There's this generic feel that there's a lot of loose plot threads here, but I can't really take that as a whole negative against this show, because it's the subject of corruption. The story never really ends. And maybe because Erik Matti expressed his intention on making a third film, so we can expect maybe characters from parts 1 and 2 to reprise their roles. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward for that. But my main takeaway here is this show is relevant, especially for Filipinos. I definitely encourage you guys to go watch this, because elections will be coming next year, and there's a segment of this show where it presents how elections and fake news correlate. So you know how these things go, two parties throwing dirt at each other. So it's an examination of the past, that these are the things that we're going to face again should we not exercise our vote properly and do proper research on which politician are we going to place on those positions of power. But enough of that. I don't want to make this review as a propaganda, but that is my main takeaway, because there's an element of anger in this show, but it's not presented as something that's preachy, because it's presented in a bleak way, in such a dark, humorous way. It's entertaining and it's gripping, definitely intense and insightful. So I'm going to give this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's not as unpredictable when it comes to the plot compared to the first film, but there are visceral thrills here that can be expected from a crime genre that I would want more of this coming from our country. So yeah, that is my review from On the Job, The Missing 8. How about you guys? Have you seen this show? Let me know what you think in the comment sections down below. Also, if you enjoyed watching this video, hit that like button and subscribe to me for weekly reviews of movies and TV shows. Thank you so much guys for watching. Until then, I'll see you all on the next one.